Alrighty. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Transfer Talk Show Tuesday. This week, we are interviewing a representative from the Financial Aid Office, and I will let our guests introduce themselves now.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Joshua Bowens. I'm a financial aid counselor here in the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships. So let's see. First thing I think is we are responsible for financial aid, which includes grants, loans, private loans, anything like that, making sure that we have everything that students need to be able to pay for their college, their schooling.
Great. Thanks so much for answering that. So, just so everyone knows, if you haven't tuned into the show before, my name is Alysha, and I am the events coordinator for Transfer Student Success and Transfer Peer Mentoring. And we are so excited to have Joshua here with us today, helping us learn more about transfer students and financial aid. So, my first question for you is going to be about our dreamer students. We have a lot of dreamers in our transfer student population. So, what is the CASFA?
Sure. So previously we had something called a DIA form, which uh, it it is actually the same thing essentially as the CASFA, which is also essentially the same thing as the FAFSA. Basically, we use information from you or your parents if you're a dependent student, how much money you made, if you have any amount in savings, how many kids you have, how many brothers and sisters you have in college, that kind of thing. And we use it in the same way as the FAFSA does to determine what's called an EFC, or expected family contribution. And based on that, we're able then to potentially give students internal aid if they are what's called an asset student, which is kind of a subcategory, if you will, of a dreamer student. Then they might be eligible for the Colorado College Responsibility Grant, or any internal scholarships or grants that we offer as well. And so basically, it just goes over all the financial information about you and your family to determine how um, much aid that you might be able to receive. The difference now is going to be that it's just going to be in online form, similar to the FAFSA, instead of the paper form that we've had here at MSU for a while. So what I think is kind of cool is there are not many schools that have had something like the DIA, so we were kind of a cutting edge when it came to that, and so now it's just really the rest of the state is kind of catching up to MSU in that aspect.
Thank you. I am so glad to hear that other schools in the state are kind of catching up to our love for dreamer students. So, thank you for sharing that information. My next question for you is, are there any scholarships that are specific to transfer students, and what do requirements look like for those?
Sure. So um, there are a few, but the transfer scholarships that we have more so have to do with if you're like belonging to any organization such as like Phi Theta Kappa, for if you are transferring from a community college. They also have to do a lot with what your GPA was, how many credits you're transferring in, and all of that can actually be completed with the general scholarship application. So if you go to the MSU website and click search and literally type in scholarships, it's going to bring you to the main scholarship page. And then on that page, there is an internal scholarship application. It has about 13 questions or so, very general, and then like a general essay question. But when you submit that, it'll automatically apply you for something like 270 some odd scholarships. And so that is definitely the best course of action for the internal scholarships that we have.
Thank you. That's some great information. Um, I My next question is also specifically geared towards transfer students. So, what sort of specific holds should transfer students look out for, considering that they're non-traditional students, and for some of them, this MSU is their third, fourth, fifth college, and they may be getting up in credit hours, and they may have transferred to several institutions.
Sure, absolutely. So there's, I think, three holds specifically that kind of come to mind. The first one deals directly with financial aid itself. It's called a transfer monitoring hold. Um, Basically, the lag between different schools and the government database can be slow. So what we don't want to have happen is for us to give aid to some students, say we give them like a Pell Grant or we give them loans or something like that, and then it turns out that they actually weren't eligible for it because perhaps they had gotten it somewhere else. But we didn't know that because the government system hadn't caught up yet. So what we have is something called a transfer monitoring hold. It's only a 7-day hold. It does prevent any aid from dispersing to the account. Or if for some reason we have put aid on the account already, it might pull it back. But there's nothing that the student has to do. It's simply giving us time for the government system to catch up, just to make sure that we are giving students the correct amount of aid. Because what we don't want to have happen is for us to say give a student some aid, and then it turns out that they're not eligible for it, and we have to take it back, but say they've already spent a refund or something like that. So now they end up having a really big balance, and we don't want to have that happen. So that's why we have that transfer monitoring hold. So if you see the hold or email, know that you don't have to do anything. It's just going to be taken off within 7 days once we can verify that everything is good to go with the account. So that's the first one. A second hold would have to be called an unusual enrollment history. So sometimes when students are going to their third, fourth, fifth institution, it can come back on the FAFSA and say, hey, we want to make sure that the student is really here to actually go to school. Because unfortunately, there are some students that try and go to different schools so they can get financial aid and then withdraw from the classes. And so then they are just trying to get the funds. So what we have to do is, if we have that, we have to verify that you have received credits at all the institutions that you have been at for the last 4 academic years. Um, so that can be done with your official or unofficial transcripts. So if you've sent them in already, we can verify them. But if for some reason we don't have them, then we might request you to send them in so that way we can just verify. Once we have verified that you have received credit at all the institutions, then we can remove that hold, and then you're able to get the aid. And then the final one, it's not necessarily a hold, but it is something to be aware of. So something called satisfactory academic progress is that students have to be meeting GPA requirements, which is at least a minimum of a 2.0, and also that they have to have completed at least 67% of their classes. Now, federal regulations say that students have to be done with their 4-year degree within 150% is what they say of the time. So in this case, it would be up to 180 attempted credits for a 120 degree, 20 credit degree. So what happens is if you are at 130 attempted credits, so let's say, you had to withdraw from a couple classes, things like that. What happens then is you're going to go on to alert status. And so you'll get an email saying that you're on alert, but that's nothing that you have to worry about. It's just letting you know, hey, you're getting close to that 180 credit mark. And so if you end up getting to that, which also includes any transfer credits that you have, then you get to that 180 and then you're actually no longer eligible for financial aid. And so if that were to happen, then you would have to actually appeal it and say, hey, I only have like 1 or 2 semesters more, or something like that. But that is something to be aware of. So that way you're not freaked out if you end up having to, um, you know, appeal or even just know that you're on alert. So I think those would be the 3 main ones for transfer students.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's definitely helpful information that I don't think is common knowledge among transfer students. So I really appreciate that information.
Mhm.
My next question is going to be geared more towards your office than transfer students. I want to know what, in your opinion, is the most underutilized financial aid resource?
That's a good question. I would probably say, um, especially in the days of the pandemic and COVID, is that we do have appointments available. Um, a lot of times what happens, especially when you're getting close to the start of the semester, unfortunately, since we have literally thousands of students, the time to be able to answer emails, or if you call in to be able to talk with someone on the phone, can definitely be extended. So my suggestion would be to make an appointment with a financial aid counselor, so that way we can sit down with you, just like this, and go over your account, and just to make sure that everything is good to go. So that's the first thing I would definitely say, because a lot of students get frustrated when they're not able to get through on the phones or something. But if you can sit down with something, it definitely makes it a lot easier. The other one that I think that is really underutilized has to do with the FAFSA itself. So we don't necessarily help students fill out the FAFSA here in the financial aid office. And the reason for that is because we actually have a community resource called the Educational Opportunity Center. Um, they're actually housed in the Community College of Denver. That's just where they live, but it's a community resource, so students from MSU are welcome to go there. So what you can do is contact them. We call it the EOC for short. So you can contact the EOC and sit down with them either in person or virtually. And you can actually go line by line with them through the FAFSA, to make sure that it's filled out correctly, that you're putting all the information correctly, so that way when it gets sent to us, then we're not missing anything, or we're not going to have to send it back for corrections or anything like that. So I would definitely recommend utilizing the EOC.
Great. That's something that I wish I had known about. I'm in my last semester, so I don't have to fill out any more financial aid documentation. But I was always getting selected for verification, so I wish that I had known that I could have sat down with somebody and really made sure that that wasn't going to happen to me. So thank you for sharing that information now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, my next question is, what do you think is the biggest misconception about financial aid? I know that when I hear frustration from students, it can often be directed towards y'all,
Mhm.
even though we know that you're all just doing the best you can. So I'm wondering, what do you think is the biggest misconception about financial aid that you wish people didn't think?
That's a super question. Um, well, I would say that aid is highly regulated. So a lot of times anything that we're requesting from a student, it's not us wanting to make students jump through hoops, or we're like, oh, we don't like the student, so we're going to select them for verification or something. But rather, things like verification actually all come from the Department of Education. So when we have a requirement on the account, um, we have to abide by the federal regulations, because if we don't, we could actually risk losing the ability to give financial aid, which would not be good. So we have to make sure to follow all of the regulations, which includes, um, for example, making sure that the forms are filled out, that they're physically signed, sometimes depending on what they are. So I think sometimes students get frustrated because they're like, oh, why do I have to turn this in? And you're like, we would love for you not to have to turn it in personally, I think, because it would be less paperwork that we would have to do, and you'd be able to get your funds and be able to attend classes, and everyone's happy. But yeah, definitely the Department of Education is very strict on what they can accept and what's necessary. So I would say that's the first thing. And then the other thing I would say is what financial aid itself covers. Um, I literally read an article this morning that was talking about, the headline said, how to be able to obtain financial aid and student loans amid the pandemic. And this kind of frustrated me, because what I think a lot of people don't understand is the term financial aid actually encompasses all aid. So a lot of students will come to us and say, hey, I don't have any financial aid. And we'll look at your account and we're like, you have financial aid. And they're like, well, no, I have loans, but I don't have financial aid. So I think a lot of times they are thinking that, grants and scholarships are considered financial aid. But in fact, financial aid encompasses all of the aid that students can get.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think that is really helpful to know, and just not just for our students, but also for the employees at the financial aid office. It's helpful for students to know that, so maybe they'll come to you a little bit less angry and confused. So that is about it. My last question for you is very general. Is there anything in my questionnaire that you feel like I miss, that you really want people to know about financial aid? And do you have any upcoming programming or events you want students to know about?
Sure. Let's see. Um, I guess a couple things. So first off, um, one thing is what we call the cost of attendance. So when you look on your financial aid, what you've been awarded, you're going to see something called a cost of attendance. Um, what you should do is think of that kind of like a budget. So how financial aid works is legally, we're only able to give students um, a certain amount of money up to that cost of attendance or up to that budget. So the way that we are able to give as much aid as possible is that we say, okay, so students normally have like, the tuition and fees, of course, but what are some other things that they need to be successful? So students need, transportation, whether it be like the RTD or gas for their car. They need to pay their bills. They have to, live somewhere, so you have room and board. So we take kind of the average amount that students usually pay. And then, so we say, based on all of this information, then that is your budget for the year. And that way, when we give financial aid, we're able to give any aid up to that amount. So a lot of times students might see it shows that they have health insurance, or it says room and board. They're not actually being charged that. It's just that we're putting that into your budget, so that way we can give you funds to be able to help pay for those type of things. So I think that's one thing that I think students, it's really important for them to know. Let's I would say is the College Opportunity Fund, or we call it COFF for short. If you haven't filled it out um, in your other school, I would definitely go ahead and do that because it's essentially free money. So this year, it is $40 per credit that gets applied automatically. Substantially less, unfortunately, than it has been in previous years, and that's because of COVID, as the state has cut funding. Um, but it's still definitely worth it, because that can be several $100s if you're a full-time student that you don't have to pay. So, yeah, definitely check out that College Opportunity Fund. Um, and then lastly, we don't have anything necessarily set up yet, but as of yesterday, which is October 1st, the new FAFSA for 21-22 actually came out. So if you haven't done it yet, I would definitely recommend going in and filling it out as soon as possible, because the sooner you fill it out, the more aid you might be able to get, especially if you do that internal scholarship application that we had talked about previously. So I would definitely do that. But also be taking a look in your emails, because we are going to be setting up some different FAFSA workshops. So if you're not able to talk with the EOC to do that, we do have a FAFSA workshop where you can sit down and fill that out. We'll also have scholarship workshops too. And these will all be sent out to your MSU Denver email, so definitely be taking a look for those. And in these workshops, they'll probably be virtually right now, but it will give you all the information you need to not only fill out the internal scholarship application, but also give you some resources for external scholarships, places you can go.
Sweet. Well, thank you for sharing that. On our transfer peer mentoring side of the house, we also have some events and programming coming up. Now that it's October, we're really excited because we're going to be celebrating MSU Denver's second annual National Transfer Student Week. That's going to be the week of October 19th through the 23rd. We will be collaborating with a bunch of different offices on campus, including financial aid, and the Phoenix Center at Auraria, to name a few. We'll also be giving away gift cards and prizes all week long for attendance. So once we get a official calendar out, definitely mark off those times, because if you attend, you can be entered to win some sweet prizes. During that week, we'll have our very first live Transfer Talk Show Tuesday. That's going to be with our Transfer Peer Mentoring Leadership Team. Earlier this year, our leadership team went to the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students convention in Atlanta, Georgia, and we got to learn a lot about the administrative side of serving transfer students. So if you have any questions about what we learned there, then please shoot an email to me at pmalysha@msudenver.edu by that previous Friday. I believe it is the 16th, and we will make sure to get those questions answered. The final thing I have to bring up is we're going to be having a social media takeover by our returning peer mentor, Nate Pryor, and he's going to be talking about how he keeps his plants alive. So look out for that next Thursday on our social media to meet some of the people from our team and learn about who's answering your questions. So that's basically what we have going on for Transfer Peer Mentoring. I want to thank you so much again, Joshua, for your time today and all of the helpful information you provided. And just say, have a good weekend. And
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to working with all of love seeing your faces, even just virtually, and I definitely hope that you continue to have a good year here at MSU.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too.